Hey, it's Ben here, and in this tutorial we're going to cover a few different things that you need to know when you're editing on multiple layers in your timeline. Now, this question popped up in one of the Facebook groups that I follow, where essentially someone is editing on a series of connected clips with a kind of big gap clip on their main storyline. Now, one of the reasons people do this when they start working with Final Cut Pro is they're used to working on that kind of track-based editing system that you have on things like Premiere Pro, Avid, and so on and so forth. So basically, those will allow you on the different tracks to kind of move your clips around, whereas on the main storyline in Final Cut Pro 10, by default you can't move things around as easily, so it kind of seems like you're stuck there. But actually working with your edit like this on the main storyline is eventually way more efficient once you get used to it, and we'll have a look at a couple of the reasons for that. So the question that popped up was basically asking why when you select a clip here or try and add a transition here, you get some gaps in your connected clip. So we're going to set that up. We'll come across to our transitions here. I'm going to jump into the dissolves here. So we'll just use the basic cross dissolve. So when you've got a clip selected, if we double click, it's going to add a cross dissolve at either side of it. And you can see basically what's going to happen here is my clips are going to shorten just to kind of account for the lack of media either side. So those clips can overlap. And what that does here is it will make this little black gap between your two clips. And when we play this back, we get those cross dissolves in there, but then we get this pop to black, which is basically the space that's been left there. And we definitely don't want that to happen. So now if we come to the same clip on our main storyline, we'll come to the cross dissolve, we'll double click and add that. It's going to create that transition, but you'll see something different happen here. So basically when we create the transition, it will shorten the whole timeline. So it's not leaving any gap at the end of that next clip. Okay, so we're not ending up with these gaps popping up. So one way we can remedy this is to, before we actually add these cross dissolves, if we just undo this, so Command and Z. So I've got all my clips here on the connected storyline. If I select all of these, holding down Shift, I can then group them together. So Command and G will group those together. And now you can see this little black box pops up around it. We've created a connected storyline. And now when we select that clip and add a cross dissolve, it's going to do the same thing of shortening the clips, but it's not going to leave that gap of black between the next clips because they're all one storyline. So this is how you would set up tracks in Final Cut Pro 10 with those connected storylines. And so you've got a lot of nice flexibility with that. But one thing you'll notice when we actually edited that, if we just do that edit again, is that we have these titles kind of roughly timed with different parts of our edit. And when we shorten this clip, so we add the cross dissolve, those titles all stay in the same place. So this title here, we would then have to go and manually kind of move that back into position and then nudge this one back to where we want it to be as well. So basically we're having to do extra bits of work because we've edited our main story, which should be on the main storyline normally, and then we've had to kind of go and fix these elements here as well to time with things. When we do that same edit on the main storyline here, so on the first half of this edit, then we'll come up to our cross dissolve and just watch the little purple titles there that I've got connected to the storyline. So I'll double click. It's going to shorten everything when I create the transition, but you can see these titles now move with my edit. So everything is kind of timed with your edit. Now the connected storyline is great for some things, but it doesn't work for other things. So another example of this as well is this layer of kind of split screens I've got set up here. So I've used the BretFX SPLITZ plugin to create these, and essentially we've added an effect up here. So you can see in my video inspector, I've got the splits 2x2, and I just kind of modified these to be at the top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right. And I'm going to trim all these to be the same length. So when I trim these, like so, snap that into position. We'll trim these right down. You can see now, with all these clips selected, if I shorten or lengthen the main storyline, it's going to move all those clips with it. So this kind of little composited set of layers for the split screen that I've got set up is going to move along with my edit, which I want it to do. They're all kind of part of that same edit. So if I feel like my cut to the piano track isn't quite right and I need to move it a bit more to get it to flow a bit more nicely, then I can do that and it's going to move all of those in one go. So again, working on the main storyline helps with that. So if we go and look at the equivalent over here, we can trim all these down. So I've added the same kind of splits effect here. You can see when I trim this beginning clip, it's not coming to the beginning of this clip, it's just moving everything with it. So basically we're not kind of able to kind of manage these connected clips. So if I just trim these down and move these across, okay, so I just went to that edit point and used the back arrow and the forward arrow to make sure that my cuts were happening at the same time. I can also use the up and down arrow to move between edit points, and that's helpful to see that all those clips kind of pop into place or position at the same time. So now when I edit part of the clip beforehand, you can see I'm moving this layer of the clip, but I'm not moving all these connected clips as well. So again, just like with the titles, when I extend that, I'm going to have to move my title, and then I'm going to have to move this as well. So again, we're just ending up having to do a bit more work when we're working with that connected storyline. So we'll just zoom out here. So a couple of things here. If you do like this idea of working with a connected storyline, that's great. If it kind of works for your workflow, then I would just go ahead and keep using it. You know, whatever works for your editing to get the job done, just use it. But I would definitely say that for myself, working with an edit timeline on the main storyline saves me a lot of time. It means that, you know, when I'm editing at the beginning of my clip, say timing or retiming part of my edit here, I can extend something here, and then when I extend part of my edit back here, all these timings that I've got are going to be in position. So I'm not going to kind of lose or slip out of position these titles and all these other connected clips. Everything that I've timed ahead in my edit is going to time perfectly once I've kind of made those adjustments. So I find for myself that actually using the main storyline for my main edit and then attaching clips to that is the best way to kind of get the job done quickly. Now, if you do want to move your clips into a storyline like this, then there's a couple of ways you can do that. So I'm just going to grab 4 clips from here. We'll copy these. I'm going to paste them onto the end here. So if I select all these clips, I can use Alt, Command, and the up arrow, and that will lift those to a connected storyline. Now you can see immediately those are all within that outline of black. So basically I can move those all together. I can move them into a different layer. So if I wanted to kind of position them above another layer, and I can also, if I move this across, I can drop those and group them together with my other connected storyline. So we've got a lot of flexibility with those. When we move them out, they become individual clips again. So you just need to be mindful of the visual information that Final Cut Pro is giving you, so you don't end up with big areas of black between your clips. So how do we kind of group these clips together? So if we select all these and we want to get rid of all these black kind of jumps, then the easiest way to do that is to actually group them together. So I'm going to use Command and G, group those together, and then I can just go through and delete those gap clips that are already in there, and that will then bring it back together. So if we have, for instance, made a transition here, so I'm just going to use the shortcut Command and T, create a transition, then I can just pull that clip into there. Or if I've got more clips down the timeline, so let's just make this a bit bigger, and I use the shortcut Alt or Option and V to paste those onto the connected storyline. If I select all of those, I can use Command and G and it will wrap those all into that group, and then I can delete that black gap clip and they'll kind of pull together. So there's some nice quick ways we can move things into a connected storyline so that we can work with it that way. Now, if after this video you decided that you want to get everything on your connected storyline back down to the main storyline, there's a quick way of doing that too. So if I select my whole connected clip and use Option, Command, and the down arrow, it's going to put those all back onto the main storyline. So that's great. So basically, if I decide that I've edited this and I've moved it in my timeline to the right spot, I can use Alt, Command, and the down arrow to move that down, and we can then get rid of any black clips that we want to. So if I do want to move clips around to a specific point on my main storyline, then I can do that. So if I grab my position tool here, then I can move these clips and leave gap clips. So that issue that you sometimes have with a connected storyline where you want to have complete control over where you can move your clips, we can do that on the main storyline just by using the position tool. So I can move this and still delete the gap clips, but I can move these as I want. So there's some other ways we can move clips around as well on the main storyline that are a little bit better than just using the position tool. You can see if I zoom in here, I've actually left a little gap clip there which is going to get in the way of things. I'm just going to shorten these clips a little bit at the end here, and then we'll have a look at one other shortcut that we can use to move clips around here. So we can use our position tool to move a clip around, but we're going to end up with a gap clip, which we may not want. So if we come to the trim tool and hold down the option key, we can move this clip around, and it's going to lengthen and shorten the clips either side of it. And in the viewer at the top, you can see the clip before it where we're going to end it. So let's end on the smile of the teeth, and that will play through. It won't leave any gaps, so you get that much better kind of edit. You won't have any kind of cleaning up to do that you might when you use the position tool. So let's just do Shift and Z to zoom back to fit. So that's a little bit of how we can kind of move clips around on the timeline and how we can kind of modify things. Now, both of these are useful. You know, it is useful to be able to, for instance, take 4 clips from the beginning of our edits and to lift them up. So Alt Command, lift them up into a connected storyline so that we can move them to another spot in our timeline. So we can just kind of grab those and move them to another spot in the timeline. Maybe we're not ready to use those clips in a different spot and we just want to keep them for later. So we might have that layer or connected storyline selected, select all the clips in it, and just tap the V key. So we've got a kind of chunk of clips that we can turn on and off at a later point in time. It's not overwriting anything, so you can see the text is there, and then when we're ready to turn these back on, we can turn them back on. So we can move clips around nicely. If we have everything timed, then we might want to put clips into that specific space, so we might want to edit something down into this area. So for instance, if I mark an in point up here and an out point down here, it's going to mark that range, and then essentially I can use the overwrite edit, or D, and that will overwrite into exactly that space. So I can bring clips down from here. So I'm going to mark an in point here, and I'm going to mark a much shorter out point there, and then use D, and it's going to overwrite into that selection. You can see the in point here is the in point that it's taking down here. So it's basically cutting it off at the end of that out point selection that I had. So if I want to time something so that it ends before that text comes on, so to replace those 4 clips I moved, I can mark an out point here. I can mark an in point on the part of the clip that I want. So we'll mark an in point just before she looks up, and then we can press D, and it will pop a clip right into that spot. So we can be really accurate in how we move clips around the timeline, in the main storyline, and then also how we fill space as well. So if we know, for instance, we want to have a clip here that kind of runs for this length, we could use that gap clip just as a placeholder to get things timed up later on in our timeline, knowing that we might be waiting to get the footage or kind of have some footage that we're waiting to source for a particular part of our video. So hopefully this is useful in terms of having a look at some techniques in which we can manage things on our main storyline and also on our connected storylines. If you have any questions about this in particular or about editing in Final Cut Pro, then just leave a comment below, and I look forward to seeing you on the next tutorial.